Welcome to the Two Bridges, One Bypass podcast. I'm your host, Jimmy Woodson. That's how we do it. Okay, so we're live. Those of you watching on YouTube or wherever you may find this, you may notice something a little different about me. And I'll explain it a little bit in a minute. Right now I'm doing what I always do, is look at the audio and think, is this actually recording? And it looks like it is, and we're on, we're hot, we're laying down a track. Sheila Davies.
Yes.
Okay, so I didn't want to get too serious right out of the gate. People, it's funny. I've made a comment probably with BJ McAvoy, which is a pending podcast coming up, that it's funny. You walk around in Dare County and you see somebody and you recognize them, you've seen them around, and it's just kind of just some person, and then you find out, oh, that person was a former, rear admiral in the Navy, or they own a really successful boat building shop and have sold boats to people all over the world, and they've got a 3-year waiting list, and you don't know because they got extra tufts and dockers on, and like everybody else. And so if you don't know Sheila and you don't know some of the things that she's been involved with here in Dare County, then you're in for a real treat today. I looked at her LinkedIn page right before she got here, and I was like, wow, okay, I knew that, but I didn't know that. So I decided we're gonna put the multicolored afro on, and we're gonna start with the less serious part of her life, 0 to probably for her like 5th grade. She probably got really serious and never looked back. So welcome.
Thank you.
And so tell us a little bit about anything you want to about your childhood, where you're from, and because I think that really tells us a lot about somebody. So
yeah, absolutely.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. So I was born in Norfolk, Virginia. So I grew up in the Hampton Roads area. We actually lived in Suffolk. Actually, in the I guess birth to 5 was probably in Chuckatuck, which is kind of in between Suffolk and Smithfield. But my parents worked in Norfolk. Dad was co-owner of an engineering firm, and Mom was for a while she worked in a medical office as like an administrator, and then later worked for his engineering firm. Went to Nansman Suffolk Academy. That was my middle school, high school. And it's funny how many people you run into down here that has a connection up there. But anyway, really blessed childhood, great parents. Neat story, my parents got married at 15 and 16. And they are still married today. They're both living, and so they've been married 55 years. Pretty amazing.
They got married in Virginia?
Yes. Mom wasn't allowed. She was pregnant with my sister. I have a sister that's 9 years older than I am. She lives in Virginia Beach. I actually have a brother that's 18 months older than I am. He lives here. I don't know if you know Scott Foster. He's Coastal Provisions, Cravings.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, but yeah, Mom and Dad, she was not allowed to finish high school at the high school back then.
Sure.
And but Dad did, and he went to night school, got his engineering degree, and so they're pretty amazing people.
Yeah, we have similar kind of background in that. My parents were married really young and pregnant really young, and you could do it. I mean, you could still do it. It's just a few more hurdles and that type of thing. So you finished high school in Nansman, Suffolk.
Mm-hmm.
What year did you graduate?
I graduated high school in 91.
Okay.
And then from William and Mary in 95.
Okay.
But I didn't go straight from NSA to William and Mary. I thought NSA, Nansman Suffolk Academy, was a pretty small school at the time. It's grown a lot now, but I thought I needed to go big. Grew up in a small area. I don't remember how many were in my graduating class, but it was less than 75. So I thought I wanted a huge school. I went to College Park, University of Maryland at College Park. That was not for me.
Wow.
Yeah, so I did my freshman year there, and then I transferred to William and Mary. So
Yeah.
loved it.
No peanut fields and hog trucks on the
No.
road in
No.
College Park.
Yeah.
What did you do in school? Did you music, drama, field hockey? What were you in?
You know, it's funny. So you would probably not believe this, but I wasn't very serious or focused in high school. I was all over the board. In fact, for senior superlatives, I was voted craziest in our high school. It's like shocking now. You can't put that together.
Folks, when we look at some of the things she's been involved with in her adult life, you'll be like, yeah, I know why they gave her the craziest. Yeah.
But no, I was very involved in sports. I played basketball, softball, swim on the swim team for the high school. In fact, actually, my sport started when I was 5. We still have this article. I've shared it with my boys. It was written by the Smithfield Times or something back in the day, where they have on the front page of the sports section a rear shot with my ponytail coming through my hat at a 5-year-old saying, only female on the boys team, and making headway or whatever. It was obviously claim to fame back then. It was a lot of fun.
Hold on, what sport was that you were the only girl on?
Back then it was baseball.
Okay, what position did you play?
Pitcher and left field.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah, and then actually in high school it was fast pitch softball. Then it was pitcher.
I gotcha. Where did you play when you weren't on the mound?
Left field. Stayed with left field and pitcher.
Gotcha. All right. So we got the big gun. Did you pitch right-handed? Were you right-handed? Did you bat right too?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, so they did that through high school.
Yes. I had 2 instances, unfortunately. I tore both of my ACLs in high school in sports. So one doing basketball and one doing powder puff football.
That's claimed a lot of careers. Powder puff football.
Yeah. In fact, at 40, last year, 46, I had to have a knee replacement already just from the abuse it took back in those days. But anyway, so I swam club at William and Mary, but that's all that I did sports-wise.
Were a lot of you club people at William and Mary former swimmers? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet it was really competitive. So what did you and your family do as a family? So you lived in Suffolk.
Boating. Dad had a boat, and so every weekend we were in Burles Bay, just hydrosliding, skiing, beach parties. And then sports. It wasn't the travel sports like it is today, but for a good part of the year we were either on the baseball field. Soccer was not my thing, but it was my brother's thing, so we'd be out there supporting him. We're only 18 months apart, so together a lot.
Yeah, soccer. We graduated in '86 in Gloucester, Virginia. Not a cosmopolitan mecca. The soccer was not. The funny thing is, we had a coach who I think he was former Air Force. I'm pretty sure he was former military, and had been stationed in Europe. And he had 2 sons. They were either twins or very close in age, and he was an awesome coach. They had played. I think they had lived young in Europe and played over there. To just have somebody that really wasn't just like an assistant football coach that I'll go coach soccer. When we had somebody who was really into it, and was into doing it the right way. And but it wasn't something that was one of the big 3 sports. My high school football coach said. Somebody said, oh, he's over by the soccer field, and coach would say, son, that is not the soccer field. That is the JV football practice field. But that was just the times. That was long before World Cup. And what's funny is our women are slaying it out there.
They're amazing.
On the world stage, and not so much the men, which maybe it's because half of the world that loves soccer doesn't let women get away with what we let our girls get away with, maybe. I'm thinking Saudi Arabia probably does not have a stacked women's soccer team. Maybe, maybe not. They have to all take a bus to practice because they can't drive themselves. But maybe they do have an awesome women's soccer team. But I'm betting the countries that allow more equity between the genders probably have better World Cup soccer. Yeah, it'd be a good way to look at women's rights. Look down the World Cup list of
Great
women's
research
teams.
project.
Yeah, it'd be a good one. So how do you, what bay was that y'all went out in, and y'all probably skied?
It's called Burles Bay.
Yeah, how do you, does that open up right to the James River? Or
Yes.
It does.
Yep. Mhm.
Okay. Is that the one you see off of the, when I go over the Monterey Merrimack heading back here, I see a body of water that opens up to the right there.
So so if you're going north, I guess that would be on the Monterey Merrimack.
Yeah, I was thinking about coming home on the coming south. You look
Okay.
right, that's Suffolk.
Right, correct, northern
Right.
Suffolk.
And there's some body of water that opens up there. It's almost, I guess it's almost near the James River Bridge. And I always wondered what that
So
little
Burles Bay is on
bay.
the other side of that, so you wouldn't be able to
Okay.
see it from the Monterey
Okay.
Merrimack. And if
I gotcha.
Dad was listening, or if he does listen to this, he'd be like, Sheila, you should know those bodies,
Yeah.
because he knows them like the back of his hand.
I'm
But
sure.
we actually lived during my high school in Eclipse, Virginia, we were on the water there, and he had a boat on a boat lift, so we could just connect right out to the James River and then keep going to go to Burles Bay under the bridge.
So how long were you at Maryland?
1 year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you were you able to do okay in school even though
Oh
you
yeah, I
hated
did
it?
fine.
Yeah.
I mean, I did okay. So A's and B's
Yeah.
to me, that was okay. But I did play club softball there that year. So I had a lot of fun, but I didn't have the connections. I was missing the connections. My roommate was a member of the soccer team. She was on the soccer team for Maryland, and happened to be the end of the hall that I was staying on. They were soccer players, and so they were a great group of girls, pretty fascinating, very talented, and fun to go watch their games. But beyond that, because your class sizes were huge. I mean, my math class, I think, had about 160 people, so just getting that connection. So.
When you guys were growing up, did you come down here for vacation?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did y'all have a place, or did you rent a
Yeah,
place
we rented.
regularly?
We rented.
Did you
yeah.
was there a part of the beach that you typically went to
We were
stay?
typically in Kettle Hills.
Okay.
Bounced sometimes between Kettle Hills and Nagshead, and we weren't oceanfront renters. We were on the beach side, but we were between the highways. And
Yeah.
it was lots of fun. And then we were married. This is where our spring break getaways were. So this is where we came. Yeah. Don't pick on us. My husband picks on us.
Poor Whitman Mary. My cousin went there. But, in his defense and in your defense, there are some serious people that attend William and Mary. They know how to let off steam too, kinda. But they're there to get it done. And my cousin was like that too. He was very, very focused, very intelligent. And after my first year of college, which was not stellar, he was getting ready to move back into the dorm or wherever he was at William and Mary. He graduated in '90, I guess. And so I was with him on campus, and I think he was already moved in because it didn't seem like we were doing a lot of work. And we went and had lunch or whatever, and it's going to be like 4 or 5 o'clock, and we're walking through the dorms and visiting with some of his friends and everything. And I'm just like, is anybody going to open a beer? Like, I haven't even seen one. Which was, something I could have stood to avoid at that time in my life. But either way, it was just like, okay, who's going to break it out?
I'm guessing he took you down to the delis, right?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
eventually we went back to the delis. But everybody it was like Saturday afternoon. I don't even think there were classes on Monday. I think they had that whole week to go. I'm like, okay, so this is what smart people do. So I've always joked about William and Mary being, but rightly so. And I was there over Christmas. We went into Colonial Williamsburg, and the kids went ice skating and everything.
Mhm.
Awesome campus. I mean,
Yeah.
anybody who's never visited, if you've never been to Harvard, then just come to Williamsburg and walk around, and it'll give
It's
you a
beautiful,
little bit of
yeah.
that feel, and it's great. And there's nice delis around there too. So you guys came down, and so three of y'all, three kids, and so what would y'all do at the beach?
Gosh, I just remember being here at Summers. That's really terrible. Well, Nick Nuzzi would love to hear this. One of the things I always remember when we go on vacations, we would walk over to Dairy Queen. And it's just one of those random things that pops in your mind, thinking back as an 8, 9, 10-year-old kid. But So, because we did mostly river and bay sports and all during the summer, we would just be on the beach like all day long, playing in the waves. And
I never surfed because I was only here when I was younger just for a week, and in the summer. So there's not really anything going on. But if there was anything going on, I really wouldn't have been able to surf because then you would have had to paddle out, which is still the reason why I don't surf.
My brother picked up surfing, but when we started getting into high school, though, our vacation shifted down to the Keys, and that's where my parents retired, and that's where they live today, down in Marathon. So it was more grade school into middle school that we vacationed here, and then high school we were scuba diving in the Keys. That was always our vacation. So even though Scott started picking up my brother surfing, and he would do it in Virginia Beach, and then he would come down just with his buddies here and day trips.
Do you still scuba dive?
No, I have vertigo now. It's crazy. So, I know it's a bummer.
I can't. I guess if I practiced, I could do it, but I have a hard time equalizing the pressure. And so, trying to spearfish. Shout out to Katie Bell, the most ruthless spearfishing person you've ever seen in your life. But I'd say 10 feet down, and I'm trying to equilibrate. And I think my technique is probably off. But to be at 30, 40, 50 feet, I mean, that seems...
It's fun. Especially in the Keys, it's so beautiful. And you don't have to wear a wetsuit if you don't want to, depending on the time of year you're going, which is really nice. Throw a tank on and jump in. Just that.
So, I guess we're getting ready to get serious. Unless there's something else you want to do.
It's hard to get serious with the...
Well, that's why I'm going to change hats. So, anything else about William and Mary? So I guess we're still kind of serious because it's undergrad, or not so serious because it's undergrad. But so, what was your major?
Kinesiology and psychology. And I thought at the time maybe med school or maybe physical therapy school. That was my thought when I graduated. It's okay. I'll take a year off and then figure out exactly where I want to go to school.
Could have been a sports psychologist.
Could have been.
The kinesiology and then the head shrinking. The pros always need that. So that's a double major. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a feeling.
But it's funny, it wasn't planned. Like, I didn't go to school thinking, okay, I'm going to get a double major. It just fell into place because it just made sense to me at the time.
But what got you on? Okay, so maybe thinking about medical school got you onto more of the science physiology side of things, and then the rest just fell into place.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. What did you do right after college?
Well, my senior year of college. So during the summers, I would come home. Except for one summer, I lived down here, and I lifeguarded at the Sanderling.
Mm-hmm.
That was in between sophomore and junior year. And the other years, I would lifeguard at the local pool, and I helped coach the swim team at the YMCA in Suffolk. And so my senior year, about halfway through the year, right before Christmas, I was contacted by the executive director of that YMCA and said, hey, we need an aquatics director. And I was like, well, I have a semester left, but I could do it part-time while I'm going to school. And so talk about probably the craziest 6 months. I was taking 18 credits, and I went ahead and accepted the job as the aquatics director, and I was driving back and forth from Williamsburg to Suffolk, Virginia. My apartment was in Williamsburg, but about 4 to 5 days a week driving back to Suffolk to keep the aquatics program running. So when I graduated, I had a full-time job with benefits, with retirement coming from the YMCA. So I didn't think I would do that for very, very long, but it would give me time to kind of take a little break from school and then figure out where I wanted to go for my master's.
So now we're getting serious. So I don't want to get into this right now, but I'm curious to ask: did that aquatics job, did that have anything to do with the other thing at all, or not really? With the thing down here that we'll talk about later.
Yeah.
Okay.
So actually, I ended up. Well, I didn't think I was going to do it for long. I was with the YMCA for 7 years. I went from aquatics director to membership director to ultimately the assistant director of the Suffolk YMCA.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. Now I get
So
it.
it's, putting some of the pieces together.
So okay, that's busy.
Yeah, and So at some point, well, I did a little internship and realized med school is not for me. It was in an urgent care, and there was a young boy that came in with a laceration in his scalp, and I was trying to just be there, assist with handing instruments and whatnot, and I got so lightheaded. I mean, he was screaming and crying, and the blood, facial wound, blood everywhere. It was, and I didn't faint, but I almost fainted. I had to step away, or I felt like I could have, and I was like, this isn't going to be for me. So, but I missed the medical part. So about 3 years after being in school, I went and got my EMT. So I was still working at the Suffolk YMCA, and then got your intermediate is what it was called at the time, and then became a paramedic. And so for volunteerism, I was a paramedic with the Suffolk Fire Department for about 5 years.
I was going to ask you a minute ago, so, you had your job at the Y, so what did you do for fun in your off time? Well, now we know.
Well, and I did.
Riding around in an ambulance.
The guy I dated was into bowling, so for a little while I did a bowling league. Okay. We played on adult softball leagues. And
did you still pitch? Slow pitch?
Yeah.
Yeah. Was that difficult for you to convert to the slow pitch? 'Cause you already had the underhand mechanism.
Yeah, just slow everything down and release at a different time.
As a hitter, because I never played organized slow pitch softball, but as a hitter, that's a challenge. Ladies too, but it's so quick. And I think a good softball player has even a shorter swing than a lot of us baseball players. So, okay, so for fun, bowling and softball and a lot of work. So, man, I bet you never threw strikes because you didn't have time to practice. Probably walking everybody. Well, I think let's get serious. I think the way I want to do this is, I think people need to understand. You need to understand what you're dealing with here, people. Because all people are not created equal. I don't care whatever that document is, it says that. So let's run through it from current, because I have a question about what you do, some of the things you're doing currently. Let's run through it. Let's go back. This is a LinkedIn page. We all know that everybody kind of pumps up their LinkedIn page a little bit, but I think most of her stuff is verifiable.
It's funny, I haven't checked that page in a while, so I'm not, well, we should probably double check everything, but it should be pretty kosher.
Okay. August 2019, and I'm not going to do the dates on all of this, but I'm interested about this. I'm going to ask more. Okay. August 19th to present, adjunct professor, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. So, yes. In what department?
Public health. So it's their MPH at UNC program, so it's master level public health courses. And I just taught my first course for the fall semester last year. I loved it. So much fun. It's all online. So I'm sitting in front of my computer, and I had 9 students in front of wherever they were, and they could see me the whole time. I could see them. So much fun.
Got it. Okay, because I went back and looked at your education. I thought you might have done that. Your public policy and admin, but you did that at Walden. Where's Walden?
Walden's online. It's based out of Minnesota. It's their main campus. They also have a campus in Baltimore.
Okay. Okay, let's continue down the list. Also currently, Director of Health and Human Services, Dare County.
Yes.
Okay, which I'm on the board for what used to be called Board of Health back before. And you can explain a little bit about that consolidation, because I still don't understand. Some people might be interested about that. So you started that?
So I started in 2014.
Okay.
And I was health director. I came back.
Okay.
I used to work for the health department, left, and then when I came back in 2014, I was hired as the health director. And then Jay Burris retired about a year and a half ago, and that's when I stepped up to oversee social services, public health, and veterans.
No, got it. Okay. And then I thought this was interesting. September 2013 till present. So still president of the Med Access Partners, a consulting firm providing comprehensive telemedicine services, including program evaluations, needs assessments, blah, blah, blah. but that is telemedicine.
Yes. So when I guess I don't want to confuse people as we jump around, but I had that break when I was not working for public health department. It was about 4 years, and when I left, I went to work for Albemarle Hospital as the director of telemedicine. They were starting up. They wanted to start up a telepsychiatry program in their emergency department, so to connect patient in the emergency department with a psychiatrist wherever. And so it was a brand new program they were starting up back in, I guess that would have been around, you have the dates, they're probably 11. And was able to start that. I mean, I didn't have any background in that, so it just took a lot of research, studying, trying to understand mental health. I certainly understood the problem. The problem is we've got patients suffering from mental health illness that are just sitting in emergency departments waiting for care, and they were sitting anywhere from days to weeks to, I know one adolescent was there 78 days waiting in an emergency department because they couldn't get care. They didn't have a bed to place him in to go into a residential treatment program that he needed. So this was a way to get diagnoses, start getting medicine to start helping treat some of the folks while they were just sitting there waiting for placement. So either they would keep sitting there waiting for placement, but at least get to be in a more comfortable position, or they could be stabilized on their medicines and then maybe discharged for outpatient care. So anyway, so I understood the problem completely, and it was basically the skill sets that I had. I learned the regulations and all, was just connecting people, and so getting psychiatrists who would provide the services to the emergency department. So long story short, that was successful. We grew it from Albemarle Hospital to the Vidant hospitals at the time, and then people were hearing about it, so we expanded it to about 18 hospitals. And then we started partnering with East Carolina University, and they took over the program and created what's called the North Carolina Statewide Telepsychiatry Program. It all during that transition time when it went from just Albemarle Hospital to ECU. Phil Donahue, who hired me back at Albemarle Hospital, he was retiring. Albemarle was getting bought out by Centera, so there was lots of big changes. So he retired, and we started this company together, MedAccess Partners, a consulting firm. So when he retired, left the hospital to do that full-time with him, and then we worked with ECU to start spreading this across the state. And before I left in the administrator, day-to-day operator role, we were up to 59 hospitals that we had installed telepsychiatry in. And then now I'm just a partner owner in the business. And when I left to take the public health job, we hired someone to do the day-to-day operations and do all the implementation and management.
Is Phil involved in community clinic
Yes.
stuff too?
He was instrumental in helping start the one here.
Yeah.
He was with the board members at the time, because he was overseeing the one in Elizabeth City, back then affiliated with Albemarle Hospital. So you may know, super nice guy.
I never met him. His name came up in some of the community clinic
Okay.
meetings.
Yeah, he's great.
That's a hard name to forget.
Yeah, and if you meet him, he's a hard man. He's really super tall and just a gentle giant. He's wonderful.
So, let's go on. Now, 2011-ish was the election, and then mayor of town of Killable Hills. How many terms?
4 terms, 8
4.
years.
8 years. Yeah. So you went Putin on it and just stayed in there. Okay. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, because my big thing is, and of course this is the minority of the people out there, but I feel sorry for you guys, because you're not really politicians. You're people that care about the town that you live in, or the county, if you're on the county board. And but unfortunately, there are constituents that don't really think real hard about, they have an interest, and my gripe is with them. Never, because locally, people, if you want to pay attention to something that really matters, it's local, and perhaps you could argue state. Above that, your ability to kind of influence is tough, but locally you really can. And I said the same thing when BJ was here. Try to look at all sides of the issue. And I know I'm preaching to the choir out there, because the people that aren't cool aren't listening to this podcast. But I always feel sorry for you guys because of you have to just kind of smile and take it, you know. And so we'll talk more about that. And so I guess this kind of overlaps with the director. So then now it goes back to the director of the telemedicine at Albemarle, which was the start of all of that stuff. And then what went on with the community development specialist job?
So that was when I was at the health department the first time, and so I was hired to start up the Dare County Substance Abuse Initiative, which involved putting substance abuse prevention education in our schools back during that time, and then starting out what used to be called New Horizons. It turned into Port Health Services, so the first substance abuse treatment in Dare County, opening that center. And that's back when you were on the board and you guys were.
It's money well spent.
Yeah.
And then where I met you first was the executive director of the Outer Banks YMCA.
Right.
So I've been wondering for years. I want the down and dirty about where did the land come from? How was it decided that, what was the genesis of it? Who did the Y come to the county? How did it happen?
So Don Snyder, he passed away a couple years ago now.
I know Don. Yeah.
Gosh, there's such an amazing group of men. So it was Don Snyder, Bill Pitt, Ralph Buxton, Greg Honeycutt. I'm trying to think of some of the other names that were they actually, and Don kind of was the spearheader. They went to the YMCA of South Hampton Roads and said, hey, we need a Y in the Outer Banks. And it was really their vision. And then they brought the players together with getting the Meekins Trust to help fund this, getting a great deal on the land. It was locally driven. And then they had looked at the thought of trying just to be an independent YMCA and not be affiliated, but they needed the support of the larger organization. So.
That was smart, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and this was on the heels, prior to the Outer Banks, the only other YMCA that was not in really the Hampton Roads area was on the Eastern Shore of Virginia, and that was opened about a year before the Outer Banks. And so, they had seen a good partnership work from a distance. So, and then right after we came on board, then Elizabeth City, and we kind of helped get them on board too, get their Y.
What were some of the initial challenges that the Y getting it rolling?
So, initially I was the assistant director of the YMCA in Suffolk, and I really wanted to transfer down here and be the director here. I was still young. I was 26, 27, and so the leadership up there, were like, I don't know if you're the right person. I don't know if it's going to work. They were thinking maybe they needed someone locally because of how everyone really values the local connection. So they let me give it a shot as the interim director. So for about the first 6 months, I was still living in Suffolk and commuting down here to try to make it work, try to make the connection, start the fundraising, or work with the board members with the fundraising. But we started the membership campaign ahead of time, trying to get charter members before the building even opened. And thankfully, because of the amazing people I named, we were rocking it. I mean, we just blew the figures out of the water. Bill Pitt designed this whole membership concept of how many memberships we need to sell and how many people we need to get engaged to kick it off right and be financially solvent. And it was just brilliant to work with. And anyway, I mean, because of the success of the board members' engagement and being able to connect with them, and they were incredibly welcoming. I remember going over to Slam and Sammy's to meet the director from Hampton Roads, and literally he wrote a job offer on the back of a bar napkin to me that day to make it official, because Greg Honeycutt and was like, when are you going to make this official? And he's like, okay, we'll make it right now. So that's kind of how it. So initially that was a bit, there was some challenges in just trying to make that work from a distance, but yet still be part of the community and have the buy-in. And then, of course, we had other challenges, just with zoning and the typical new construction challenges. That really didn't hit as much in the initial phase, but when we did the expansion about 2 years after we opened, where we added the skate park and the racquetball courts and the additional space, that was tough. Just the
In the town of Naxa, it was tough.
yeah, what?
Huh. Sounds like a rubber stamp.
Not back then.
Yeah, not back then. Exactly, not back then. Well, I think we discovered something interesting. There's actually a William and Mary female alumnus that has been made an offer in a bar on the back of a napkin.
There you go. See, there's some.
Probably the only one ever. Yeah, in the history of William and Mary. There'll be a special plaque placed. Well, that's
And
good.
I bet I still have that tucked away. Not that I'm a hoarder or anything, but I bet I
Yeah.
have that somewhere in my little
You
keepsake
got
box.
that
'Cause was
framed.
pretty
You got that
special.
framed. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
And the Y is awesome. And there's been great people, and there are great people that work there, and they do a great job taking care of the place and keeping the equipment up to date. And they've even, and they for sure they didn't have to do this, but when they knocked out the wall where that PT room was,
Mhm.
and then they put that really expensive contraption that's got a heavy bag on it and another squat rack, and it's because people like to do what they call functional training. That's a whole nother podcast, people. But you need space. There's medicine balls and jump ropes and this, that, and the other thing, and they did it. They made it happen. And some of that equipment over there it's nice. And so I thought that was cool because, the Y, for a lot of people, have been just old dingy gyms with iron. The Y is not where that's. If you think you're going in there, find a bucket of chalk and big sweaty guys, you're not. But yet they have kind of. They've opened up that space, and so you see people going in and getting it done in kind of the newfangled ways of getting some exercise. So, I have to ask, how long did it take you to decide to run for mayor? Was that something that you really took a long time to kind of talk yourself into, or did you have a eureka moment where you thought,
Yeah, it really wasn't a long time to decide because it wasn't even on my radar. Now, serving the town or being involved in the town and maybe even dabbling in politics was a little bit like in the back of my mind. Because I studied public policy, and I was on the zoning board of adjustment for the town, but we had neighbors. We had not even met them before, but they were about 4 houses down, and guy knocked on my door and said, we need some change in the town. We need someone to step up and run, and we've got to think of a good person. That's where it started. And at the time, because we didn't know each other, he didn't really know my full background. He was just like, we need a brainstorm. We need the neighbors to get engaged. We're going to have a meeting. Let's talk about this. And that's really kind of, so it was probably, it was a few weeks as far as thinking about it. When I thought, okay, I might really do this, I went and met with Bill Pitt. I met with Bob Mueller, just folks. I met with Sherry Rollison, just folks that I knew had served and that I respected, and said, what's it like? Can I do it? What do you think? What's going to be the biggest headache? And can I do it knowing that it's not a full-time job? That's not what pays your bills. So I knew I still had to maintain my livelihood and do my livelihood really well, not just go through the motions. And so, the question about the time commitment and the headache factor and whatnot. But and I remember Bill saying, because I don't know if Bill really thought initially that I could win when he first met with me. We met and had coffee, but he said, I think you should do it because you're going to grow as a person whether you win or lose. And then it was after the League of Women's Voter Forum that he came up that night and he goes, I think you're going to be our next mayor. And so I think for him there was probably some change during that time and maybe his first opinion of, but he encouraged me to do it. So.
Well, maybe when he saw you, out in public, and the I've never been to the voters, the
League of Women Voters
League of Women,
Forum.
League of Women Voters, thank you. I've never been to one of the debates, but I bet there's some people in the audience that are pretty serious about what's going on up on that stage. And when he saw you up there, you know, you gotta keep your cool, and you gotta handle questions, and you gotta articulate. And if you can get through that, I mean, you know, it's probably about as bad as it gets.
Unless when people want to talk about dogs on the beach.
Well, yeah, once you're mayor,
Or hens.
that's in the campaigning process.
Yes,
Once
yes,
you're
yeah,
mayor, it's a
absolutely.
whole different thing, because now y'all have meetings, and unfortunately you invite people to come,
Right.
and they show up.
Unfortunately, but yes.
Yeah.
Well, the unpredicted, I mean, you know, the unpredictable happens then. Whereas, and at the League of Women Voters, people can ask you any question you need to be able to be prepared. But it's not like a debate. Like, you don't argue or discuss with your opponents.
You just give
You
your
just
position,
give your position.
your answer. Okay.
And then it's controlled. So it's a safe way for candidates to kind of share what they believe and how they think they can do the job.
That was almost 10 years ago.
Yeah, I know. So when I was running, my oldest was 3, and my youngest was 1.5. It's hard to believe.
Perfect time to take a second,
And,
third
yeah.
job.
Right. I don't know what I was thinking back then, but
Lots of evening meetings and things like that. So, well, I'm sure your children recognize you now. That you're.
they do. And maybe it's that, you know, I can't say no. Like, I'm coaching both of their basketball teams, and I'm the president of the baseball league, and keep the scorebook. You know, I think it's this. Okay, I'm here. I'm engaged.
And somewhere there's doing the laundry and taking a shower and getting some sleep.
Yeah.
What were the hot button issues in 2010?
Well, one of the biggest issues was Lowe's back then. Some people just outright didn't want it. We live right beside there, so for me, it wasn't I don't want it, but I need it to be safer. I need some safety considerations, and the bigger picture was the frustration was how the board at the time was responding to the citizens. So, unfortunately, there were meetings that were standing room only, citizens expressing their concerns, and reports back where they just, you know, the board members gave the appearance that they had already made up their mind. They weren't going to listen. They knew what vote they were going to take, regardless of what was being said at the podium. And sometimes getting in kind of heated exchanges back with the citizens versus, you might not like what everyone's saying, but be respectful, and that's what you're there for. You're there to listen. So.
That's tough. And to me, that's something that I feel like I would really have to. If you're willing to commit to be the mayor, to run, to do all that, to go all that, you know, you've already set in your mind's eye, like, hey, I'm the mayor. You know, I'm going to have civil discourse with everyone, regardless of whether they want to have it with me. And you're not making that rule right out of the gate. Then
Shouldn't be doing it.
You shouldn't be doing it.
And you do have to, I mean, I had to develop some tough skin. I mean, the first 6 months, it was rough. Because when I was elected, it was a changeover of the board. Because when I was elected, 2 new commissioners were elected. So it changed, so to speak, the feel of the majority back then. And so it was, as local politics get, nothing on the federal level, it was a little bit polarized. And there was some ill will and negative feelings, and you know, I felt one particular media outlet liked to try to create drama and put a negative spin on things, and you have to realize that it's not necessarily a dagger towards you, it's just the environment. So
but you know, this funny thing is, once something like Lowe's is built and it's here for a while, it's hard to imagine not having it. And this place is so insane in the summertime, and all the homes that have to be maintained here, from more of a like a personal thing, not the commercial side, because I know the commercial guys probably didn't need Lowe's. You know, they had other places, Kellogg's and whatnot, where they got their stuff all the time. They probably weren't dying for Lowe's, but yeah, it's tough thinking about change and throwing up something new and commercial, and especially if you've lived here 40, 50, 60,
Right.
70 years. I can surely see it. You just, like, when does it stop? A funny thing about change was Barry Shannon is a retired dentist, okay, and he practiced almost right behind the post office in KDH. As a matter of fact, I do believe the lot or the building where Access Printing is, shout out to Adam Baldwin, thanks for helping with the banners today, that I think that's where Dr. Shannon's office used to be. Very small, just like a shotgun shack. The most beautiful live oaks growing on the side of the lot. And he only had 4 or 5 parking spots. And we didn't really talk seriously about me buying his practice or coming in as an associate, really nothing like that. But I was walking out of there and I thought, I would hate to buy this building and property and think that I would have to cut those live oaks down one day, because they gotta go. You need space. You would have to have space. He was lucky enough to run a tight ship. It wasn't a huge office, and he did it his way, and I bet he loved it for all those years working with his wife. But I thought about cutting down those trees. Well, Lowe's cut down plenty of trees, so I can see both sides of it. And so therefore I understand why people come in and say, we don't want this. And did you have people come in and say, other than Lowe's, and say, we want this?
Well, there were a few people.
Okay.
Yeah, there were some.
Okay.
Well, and you also saw the professions that would benefit. So whether it's insurance, whether it's builders or subcontractors. When you have growth and development, there are folks that directly benefit from that, in addition to the long-term effect of having an asset or a resource in your community.
So the people on the construction side were proponents of it, not because of work they would get building it.
Well, there's some of that.
Okay.
Some of that, but then access. Especially some of your folks that were doing, like you mentioned, home repairs and stuff, or smaller businesses. So it's
yeah. Okay.
But the whole debate, it's tough. The whole debate of change and keeping the Outer Banks, preserving this special thing that we love about the Outer Banks, but recognizing and validating property owners' rights. And if you buy the land, your ability to use the land as allowed in ordinance, how can we prevent you? And that's a huge debate that's going on right now, even with the large homes, and it's going to be an ongoing thing. And then for us, because eventually there's not going to be new land to develop in the Outer Banks, it's the whole redevelopment concept and what's allowed and how the ordinances fit to either support or not.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. When you look at the value of the land and looking at it from the way somebody in finance or an economist would look at it, you have X amount of dollars for land, and you can only put one small newer cottage on it. It ain't gonna work. But what if you did a duplex? But now we're talking about more density. Now you're talking about sewage and parking and traffic. Yet another interesting one. But BJ and I talked a little bit about the sidewalks being put in, which are great, and how a lot of times late at night, somebody walking close to the white line, and how much that terrifies me. Traffic, and as a function of more density, as a function of the need to have what you build, or if you tear down something, 2 old things, and then you build one giant thing, or a denser quadplex or something on that lot, and now we have more density. So now we have more traffic, and now we have more sewage.
That's probably, to me, one of the if I was to say what's the biggest threat to the Outer Banks long term, it's got to be one of them. you think of how many septic tanks we have, and then, I mean, just like today driving over here, I'm thinking, I was coming through Manio, there's homes that are right there that are just under, you know, anytime you have water on top of your grass in your tank.
Right. Don't think it perks at that point.
It's that public health professional in me goes, oh, this
Right.
is a big issue down the road.
Well, in the short term, at least nobody's swimming in the Sound, you know, in February, so we can,
Great.
wow, that's super interesting. That's super interesting. So when, I forget the timeline from your LinkedIn page, so you took a break from, what did you take a break from while you were mayor? I thought that you didn't.
No, so when I was first elected, I was still with Albemarle Hospital doing the telemedicine. So during the time of being mayor, I left Albemarle and started Med Access Partners with Phil. And then during that, I guess, first 4 years, I left Med Access as far as the day-to-day work and went to work for the county. Now, right as I was, knowing this was going to be my last term last year, that's when I said, oh, let me look into the teaching. So that I just picked up right in August.
Is there a way to kind of bullet point exactly what Dare County Health and Human Services does? The main bullet points that what you guys do.
Sure. So it falls under 3 different categories. Health and Human Services, we have Veterans Affairs, which is assisting veterans with benefits, and big thing is benefits, but connection to services that veterans need. And then, so that's one component. The second component is social services, and social services encompasses adult welfare, child welfare, assistance programs, whether it's with financial need, Medicaid, food stamps. We have energy assistance programs, and then you have public health. And public health is really a lot encompassing. And it's different county to county. So in Dare County, we don't do traditional primary care under public health, but we do women's health, we do prenatal care, we do home health and hospice. That's pretty unique now. There's not many public health agencies that still run that. Environmental health, so all of your food and lodging inspections, your septic permitting, that all falls under public health, under the environmental health division. Then we also have, we do communicable disease management. We had at one point the dental program in the schools.
Yes.
So, and then we do health education and promotion. So we're in the schools working with students on healthy choices, healthy lifestyles, and then we also do the same type of communication in the community. And then we're engaged in substance abuse and mental health work. That's, a pretty good bulleted list.
Yeah, and I tell you, one of the things that really stands out in my mind is the Child Protective Services, because it's kids.
Right, and you get those weekly reports, and they're tough.
It is. But we'll talk for a minute about why Dare County is a little bit more, is exceptional in a good way relative to some other counties. I think because people like to come here and spend money, basically. And there are a lot of places where people don't come there and spend money. Mm-hmm. And the people that live there are not extremely wealthy. And the Department of Health, the Health and Human Services, can't do that much. And it's a little different here. I'll let you talk about that. But when you talk about, we talked about being mayor and just having, keeping it calm and having the thick skin and just understanding that, it's just a job and you're there to serve. But Child Protective Services, I don't know how many days I could possibly be employed there before I was fired and jailed, right? Because it's a kid. And I understand people have some hard times and they get wound up in some stuff, but just the poor little dudes. And y'all brought a few of them into the practice, more than a few in the practice, and they're just awesome and clean their teeth and have a good time and everything. And but you, like me, had a ridiculous Leave It to Beaver life.
Right.
We did without nothing, but we didn't have everything. But we had parents that were there every night, and that makes a big difference. So tell me why Dare County has some advantages maybe over some counties in more rural areas.
Well, the first biggest reason is hats off to our county commissioners because they provide additional funding and support. Whether it's on the public health side or social services side, there's set dollar amounts that you get from either federal funding or state funding. And those counties who do not have support and the, through tax revenue or whatever that's allocated to them from the county level, can't run the type programs that we run. So, in both departments, health and social services, we have state mandates and in some places federal mandates, things we have to do, but then we're able to do above and beyond services. So, for example, in adult protective or an adult, not adult realm, but we, for whether it's adults or children, we have a lot of staff that work in interventions. They're trying to intervene before it ever gets to the CPS or APS level where you're reporting an incident. So trying to work with families through maybe initial reports that aren't to the level of abuse or neglect, where we can have staff go in and work with the families and try to connect them to resources or connect them to education or counseling or therapy, or somehow intervening before it gets to be, what really just drags you down when you hear about the, sometimes the really unfortunate, scary stories. But we wouldn't be able to do that and provide those services if it weren't for the county giving and enabling us to do that by hiring the qualified staff and putting them into place.
Okay. And then the county has the money because, like we were just talking about, what I said earlier is we're fortunate that we have a really great place that people like to visit, and they like to invest in real estate, and they like to come down here and spend money at Tortugas, and it all goes into the coffers. And we charge them a little extra tax for doing that, but that's okay. Hey, we need to keep, for those of you that thinks it, like, what's this like meal or hotel charge?
Occupancy, what is that?
Look,
Yeah.
people out there, I know most of you get it, but I don't know why I always try to educate the invincibly ignorant, but I'm going to give it one more shot. How many people come to Dare County in any good week in July? What is the influx for that week? How many hundreds of thousands?
350,000? You're talking
Okay.
throughout the Outer Banks?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And we're
Yeah.
about 35,000 year round.
Correct. And for the longest time, I thought it was like 150,000. I'm pulling 70s numbers or something like that. So what we need to maintain is, and I know some young people listen to this, like junior high age kids. You have to realize what we need to maintain is the infrastructure.
Right.
And the paramedics and the police officers and just
Firefighters.
fill in the blank. Yeah.
Right. And then add the lifeguards during the summer.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about the infrastructure, the wear and tear on the roads, the curbs, the trash cans, the everything. So we have to maintain that. So that's why there's a little extra charge. We pay it too at restaurants, don't we? We all, even locals pay it.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't, rent somebody else's cottage or go get a room in a hotel, you won't pay that.
Right.
But we do pay it on the meal side. So yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. What else didn't we cover from HHS? Child Protective, we talked about it. We talked about hospice. Yeah. I think what's really interesting is what would seem like mundane public health things, but really are interesting, need to be addressed, like vaping in public. Okay, this kind of stuff comes up. Service dogs.
Yes, and I was even going to throw out, we haven't talked about dangerous dogs. That's a tough one too. It does fall under making that declaration of an animal is dangerous, and the consequence that falls under public health in Dare County.
That's a tough one. And there's actually a committee that hears, both sides of the story, and to have to make a call on somebody's dog, does the county have the authority to have the dog put down?
Yes. So the way the statute's written, the authority unfortunately rests with the health director, and then the committee is in place if someone appeals that decision. Then they either uphold the decision, and if the decision is upheld, meaning the dog's declared dangerous and it has to to euthanize, then the animal control SPC carries out that function.
Yeah, that's a tough one,
Yeah,
because
that's
everybody
not fun.
loves their dog.
They do. Unfortunately, there is state statute that has very specific requirements to meet the threshold, but even they're tough. They're terribly tough because they're so emotionally charged, understandably.
I don't get it. I mean, I'd be a little emotionally charged the other way against my dog. If my dog did that, I don't think we'd need the health director. But that, I'm sure I'll get lots of hate on the comments on that one, but haters gonna hate, you know how it is. Okay. Well, tell me something about what is my role as the board member for Health and Human Services? What am I there to do?
Sure. So it's interesting, and if you want, I'll step back. We mentioned we might talk about DHHS, and now it is DHHS, which is the Department of Health and Human Services, whereas back in 2012 it was not. It was Department of Public Health and Department of Social Services. Because the role of the board changed a little bit when we had that what's termed consolidation.
We'll talk about the consolidation. You're
Okay.
right. I did want to talk about that.
Okay.
So that seems the right way to do it. Go ahead.
Okay, so there was legislation that was adopted, I believe it was in around the 2013 timeframe, North Carolina legislation that allowed health and social services to become consolidated agencies under county leadership. Prior to that, the state statute didn't allow that. It only allowed departments of social services that had to have a social services board and departments of public health that had a public health board. And under that structure, the social services director reported to that board. They didn't report to the county manager like now under a consolidated agency. And the same thing with the Board of Health. The health director reported to the board. So at the time, board members had the hiring, firing, decision-making authority over the directors. When the legislation changed to allow that, you had to combine at least two services to become a consolidated agency. So initially, Dare County, when they consolidated, they put public health and transportation together. This was while I was away. I was not here as part of this, but social services was not part of the consolidation. They still had a social services board that at the time Jay Burris reported to them. But it was within months that they said, you know what, let's make it health and human services and have public health and social services together. And at that point, they combined the two boards, the health board and the social services board, and the board members became more of an advisory type board, with the exception of under the public health statute, as a board member, you have some specific responsibilities and authority to grant rules, to do rulemaking, which is pretty amazing. It gives the board a right and responsibility to enact rules that ultimately become laws to help protect the public's health. If there's a specific public health issue that the local community feels like they need to address, then you have the authority to do that. So in your role, now getting to the answer of your question, your role, you're there to kind of help keep your finger on what's going on in the community and make sure that, you know, we're aware of that. So if there's things happening that you don't think that either myself or the staff are aware of, so being that advisory and that link to the community. But then also on the social services, on the public health side, is being able to say, wait a minute, we have a public health need that's not being addressed by current legislation. Let's adopt a rule. And you guys, I love being able to share, you were the first board in the state of North Carolina to expand the no smoking or no tobacco use, no smoking in restaurants and bars to include e-cigarettes. And that was back in 2014 before, we knew it was going to be a problem, but we didn't have the science yet so we were on the cutting edge, and you guys, adopted a model rule that's now being implemented in other counties across the state.
Huh. Okay. Yeah, I have to tell you, I feel like I benefit more from being on the board than you guys benefit having me there, because I do feel like it's really opened my eyes to the services that you guys provide. But in some ways, it saddens me that there has to be a a county structure that cares for people. And well, you know, we all move away from home. We don't just build another house on the farm and live next to the grandparents anymore. At least, you know, most of us don't. And so people are left without a support net. You know, and if they don't have a church or some type of other organization where there are people there that can help them out, you guys are the safety net.
Yeah, and there's, you know, unfortunately, what you see in the weekly reports on some of the conditions that some of our children face, they never get the opportunities that you and I had growing up. And so then that translates, and this book in front of me, that translates into challenges that they're going to face into adulthood and potentially their whole life because of the foundational trauma that they had, you know, in their early years. And so again, we're fortunate in Dare County to be able to try to, you know, surround them with services and help them achieve the best life that they can. And in other communities in North Carolina, it doesn't happen at the same level.
Yeah, that's for sure. Did you want to say something about that?
Well, it's so, you know me in my like studious way, I'm going to look at the questions and go, But one of the questions you put about was about like favorite book or the book you would want to gift to someone. And that's what I brought, and I'm gifting it to you.
Oh.
I don't know if I'm a nonfiction, surprise, a nonfiction reader. But The Deepest Well it's a deep book. It's written, Nadine Burke is the author, and it kind of goes to describe basically what happens with childhood trauma and adverse childhood experiences and how that impacts. Of course, we understand the social, emotional, but she did a multi-year study to show how it affects the physical health. And it's just extraordinary. And it doesn't need to be a life sentence to that. Like if you can start putting in coping mechanisms and developing ways to support folks, and you can overcome the detriment of adverse childhood experiences. It's a really deep and powerful book, and so I figured if there's any interest in that with what you do, and sometimes it helps link the, you know, you see whether it's an employee, because if it's manifested later in life, or a young child or an adolescent that's acting out, you know, it's not, why are you doing this, what's wrong with you? It's what happened to you, you know, what's going on, it's not just what you're showing me, there's often something that's a much deeper cause, and this is a great book to kind of explore that.
So I think most of you could probably read if you're watching on YouTube, but the book is called The Deepest Well, and the tagline is Healing the Long-Term Effects of Childhood Adversity. And it's written by Nadine Burke Harris, MD. I'm afraid if I read this, I'm going to know for a fact I'm a horrible parent. Instead of just
No, you won't.
You know, you mentioned something earlier that, speaking of, and thank you, that was tough, and I don't read fiction either. When you mentioned prenatal, right, and also taking care of the pregnant moms, I heard a piece on NPR one afternoon, and they were up in Delaware, and they were talking about there was a position of like a nurse position, counselor position, and she sees these pregnant moms, and they talked about what her annual wage was versus what one kid in the NICU for 9 weeks would cost. And I was like, okay, hire another one, you know. And unfortunately, sometimes when people go to I don't care what kind of insurance you have when you go to the NICU. It's going to break you because the mom's in there and she can't go back to work, and dad's in there a lot and he's missing work. Even if you have insurance, then like it will break you.
Because you're normally not in there a day or two.
Yeah. So to be able to get, hopefully the pregnant mom will comply and come in and check the blood sugar and check the blood sugar and make sure everybody's healthy, doing what you're supposed to do, healthy baby, bam. Hundreds of thousands of dollars not having to be spent on that. So I thought about that when you mentioned the prenatal care, folks. Bang for your buck.
Well, and you touch on something that's the root of public health too, is the prevention. You know, I mean, we still haven't as a society fully embraced prevention and how it's an economical way to, address health and social issues. We spend much less on prevention than we do on treatment. Granted, if we could focus more on prevention, it would help drive lower treatment costs. But
especially in the last year of life, which I think Americans are. I think we're wimps. I think we're wimps, and nobody wants to just tap out and say I want to die. But I also think sometimes no treatment is not offered. I don't know. I've never been at the end of life. I mean, obviously all my grandparents are dead, so they've all had an end of life time. But I remember my paternal grandfather. He had some kidney issues and he had arthritis. He took a lot of meds for a lot of years, and the kidneys really started to suffer. Of course, that affects everything. But I remember the doc saying, and you know how docs will say it when they really don't advise it, but yet it is an option. And he's like, nah, I'm good. We've done enough. We've all done enough. And I guess at some point, you're tired. You're tired, and all the musicians and movie stars you loved when you grew up, they're all dead. So what's there really left to live for, But you at some point, I guess you do. You get tired. Being sick and not feeling good and watching everybody around you suffer. I mean, I can't imagine. I've never been on my deathbed, but I was witness to him making that decision.
Wow.
And it's hard. If you can get another week with your grandchildren or your kids, I'd probably take it. But then again, I probably would.
I can't get there.
Yeah, we're not that far away from it though.
I know, it's terrible.
So, what are the biggest challenges for Dare County Health and Human Services? What are the things that no matter what you do, you just can't? Because it seems like you guys do a really good job. You brought us some stats about like the placements of the kids in Child Protective Services and the extreme lengths that y'all go to try to keep a family member involved with a child that may have to be separated from his parents. And it seems to me, I guess another benefit we have is we're not huge. Because some of the numbers like out from Alamance County, and that's Charlotte, is it not? No, it's not.
It's out that way,
I
but
forget
it's more
what
Greensboro. On the other side of Greensboro is Alamance.
Okay, I forget what county Charlotte is actually
Mecklenburg.
in. Yep, Mecklenburg. Just huge, big, lot of people, a lot of density. It's tough to manage it.
Right.
And I know a lot of stuff when we compare apples to apples in some of the meetings about what Dare County does and the successes, and other people have much bigger challenges than we do. But what's our biggest challenge here?
There's a number of them still here. Staffing is a huge issue. We are blessed with the folks that we have, but sometimes we have vacancies that sit far too long because either we can't find the folks with the required credentials that we need, either because it's a state requirement for the credentials or it's because it's necessary for the job, because they can't find housing or it's just they're not here. And so that's a tough one. We really are feeling that in our home health and hospice unit, and that's just been a reoccurring issue. And that working in that particular unit, and that's tough work. You talk about end of life and the folks that they're serving. That's day in and day out is really tough. So I would say first and foremost is our staffing challenges, and then we've got just the community issues that we have around mental health and substance abuse, because those then affect your CPS cases and your APS cases and your compliance with your prenatal visits. And so, I don't know that it's not unique to Dare County. It's more of just a community systemic society issue, but it's a huge problem, and it still is here.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Not too hard to believe, really.
You probably want to put your clown hat back. I don't want this getting so deep, right?
No. I mean, I mean, I have podcasts that I listen to regularly, and sometimes they're too light for me, sometimes they're too heavy for me. So the heavy people, we got the one for you when I put this one up. But I think it's tough to get something like this from the horse's mouth, because who's got time, and it's difficult to understand just from reading the Outer Banks Voice or the Virginia Pilot doesn't really cover anything we do. So I thought it was important for people to know this kind of stuff. What else you got?
What else do I have?
What's your favorite movie?
I didn't answer that one because
That's hard.
It is hard, and but when I have the TV on, I'm watching sports. I still love my sports. I'm so excited. I love March Madness. Yeah, super fun. But whether it's watching baseball or tennis, that is a hobby. I do play tennis. That's like my therapy, to go out and whack that ball.
Okay,
That's
I
fun.
didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
And we have a great Outer Banks Tennis Association down here, so get to play in leagues with women, and there's mixed doubles. It's just a lot of fun.
Do you play singles and doubles?
I just do doubles now with these knees.
Yeah.
I gotta stick to doubles. So, but I didn't even pick up tennis until I was 40, so it's been a big life thing. But it's fun. Like I said, it's my therapy.
Yeah, there's not a lot of things that we do as kids that they're out. I mean, guys play football, and 90% of us or more never play after high school.
Right.
And regular baseball, you don't play that anymore.
Now I'll throw. Well, and my oldest son, I can't really throw with him much more because he just hurls it.
Bring
Yeah,
the heat.
Yeah, the reflexes aren't where they used to be. My youngest son is getting into golf, and I do like to golf. I used to get to play a lot of golf with the YMCA. I don't as much now, but that's fun to go out with him and
Yeah, that's a great one. If you've got some time, I don't play golf. I play golf once a year for a fundraiser with some guys I used to go to high school
hard
with.
to play golf once a year, isn't it?
I'll tell you something. I think some of you people out there that play golf infrequently will probably, if you walk up to the tee and say, I'm going to hit this 150 yards, and then typically it doesn't go too far off the target. But when you try to, get that big driver out of the bag and think you're going to hit it, you're not going to do it. It's not going to happen. So, and typically, I think you played enough golf to know this. If you haven't played in a while, the first 9, you're like, I'm not too, and then it all goes off the rails.
I should be playing this more because I'm so good, right?
And then it all goes off the rails on the back 9 as you start to take a bigger swing and that type of stuff. But it's just a fun thing that I play. But I actually, I'm going to say this publicly, so maybe I'll do it. I've been meaning to get my youngest two, which are 13 and 12, and get them some lessons. And because if you've got the time, it's a nice 2 or 3 hours that you can spend with your kids or your spouse or whomever. And generally, most golf courses are kind of pretty, especially around here.
They are, and it is fun. Like we're a family of 4, my husband and the 2 boys, and we each split up with a boy and get in the cart, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is. But how about favorite? What if it was favorite drama? The Godfather.
I used to love, before I had children, CSI and NYPD.
Okay.
But after I had kids, I can't watch their shows anymore.
So you like the crime dramas and stuff like that?
Yeah, but I don't find the enjoyment anymore out of them. But and it really was after becoming a mother. I don't know why. Well, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we they're our deepest fears, and we don't need them.
Yeah.
Broadcast and cinematic quality color. What about podcast?
So I do, and part of it's because I'm not, the most recent podcasts are yours, and I'm loving them. So by the way, I just love this concept that you're doing. But I really haven't been doing those. Part of it's because I'm not sitting still long enough. So I really enjoy TED Talks. In fact, Nadine Burke, if you don't want to read the book, she's got a TED Talk that's just captures this amazingly well. So, for me, I need to research or I need to learn about a topic or something's intriguing to me, so I'll Google and find something, from a somewhat of a scholarly source or a source you can trust and recommend, and then do a TED Talk or read a journal. I know I sound so boring, but Maybe I am. I don't know.
Just half of you. Just the William and Mary hat. Whatever it is.
The other part's a lot of fun.
Well, you know, I'm. That's interesting. You brought up the journal articles. I have the hardest time with journal articles. Maybe it's just a dental thing, but it seems like they all end with but further studies need to be undertaken.
Well, they have to do that.
I know that. But I don't, and maybe it's because dentistry is just so focused, and it really is a manageable problem. It's so preventable, and manageable. But you know, some of us just are unlucky, and we're high risk, and we're not doing the things to mitigate the high risk. We're doing the same things as everybody else. Most of the time, I brush twice a day. I don't really floss. Well, you know what? That's not that far out of the norm. But if you're high risk, you're going to wind up with, you know, the usual cavities or gum disease or both. But one of the things that gets me about the research is it's tough to set up studies.
Right.
You see it in your stuff too.
Yeah.
To follow people for years and to know they're, like, let's say they're keeping a food journal. Like, that's notoriously inaccurate. People's memories are inaccurate. So when you look at the data and you're just staring at the data, I was just like, I get it. This is interesting, and maybe somebody can move on from this, maybe redo it or change a few things, and we can start to narrow it down. But it's hard. It's like when some federal government agency, they didn't say there's no benefit to flossing. I think what they looked at was, maybe it was NIH, what they looked at was, is there good evidence? And hey, if all the studies are poor,
right,
then there's no good evidence. That's just
it doesn't mean that flossing isn't
right. Like, there may not be good evidence that it may be a really poor study about wearing your seatbelt. Okay, the study is poor. Maybe the whole bodies of the studies are poor. Therefore, you can't say there's good evidence. But we've all seen the windshield with the hole in it where the body went through it, so that's good evidence. But the studies out there, now that's just an example of how studies can give bad evidence. They can't be used by like a government agency. They have to, like, this is not a good study. So do you know how you set up a good flossing study? And this illustrates how hard, like, do not believe anything you read on Google that's some study, even if it's from the ADA or anybody, because I'm telling you, it's hard to set up a good study. Here's your perfect flossing study. 1,000 people in one group, 1,000 in the other, okay? They all are brushed and flossed by a team of professionals that have all been trained on a certain way to do it. It gets done at the same time during the day. They use the same floss, they use the same technique, and guess what? They all get the same diet. Somebody's not eating Twinkies and Ho-Hos or something like that. And just so we can get, and guess what? They all get the same amount of sleep. And we talked about the diet. And they all have the same level of stressful jobs. That way, in the end, the non-flossers and the flossers, maybe the flossers, if you would have flossed, maybe they have, in your other group, somebody's going to make sure they don't floss.
right.
But everything else stays the same. The quality of the brushing, the diet, the sleep, the job stress, because it all affects the health of the gingiva. And eventually, that's what you look at. You'll look at the amount of plaque and whether the gums are bleeding and whether there's bone loss, and you'll look at all the things you can't control for. So all the things online were like, well, everybody's happy now that whoever came out, the NIH says, like, floss. But what they were saying is flossing does no good. But really what it was is that the study really wasn't that good, that they were basing their recommendation about daily flossing. So, yeah, public health is difficult because, number one, people don't want to do, it's easier not to do the right thing sometimes. It's easier to eat a Twinkie because they're awesome.
Right. People don't necessarily like the message.
Then, yeah, exactly. And it's really hard to design a study to prove or to find out what the right answer is because even financially, it's difficult. But from an organizational standpoint, it's impossible.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm looking and personally like at a journal article, first thing you do is try to dissect, is this going to be worth my time reading, because is there going to be any validity? But even like locally, you really have to take, we've got a diabetes management program just right now that's going on, and we're seeing incredible results. We've done this program before, but we've had some staff change and just some really engaged folks in this most recent session, and engaged instructors, and we're already seeing the drops in their A1C, we're seeing weight loss, and just some great results. Now, couldn't really write and publish a study on that because it's such a small cohort and who knows all the different variables, but you know what, it's working. We're seeing the results we want to see, so we're going to celebrate it, we're going to duplicate, try to do it again with the next cohort. And but could it make a journal article and be something published in scientific validity?
Right. No, that's right. That's right. So somebody on the high might say, well, there's no evidence that you're
Right.
Yes, it is, because we got the A1Cs and everybody's feeling better. And so what are the main one or two things that group is doing to control the blood sugar?
Well, it starts off with basic stuff. I mean, one of their basic lessons is plate size and portion control. What's on your plate and how much of each thing sitting around the plate. It's sharing healthy recipes. It's activity. I mean, it's basic stuff that sometimes people need to come together and take a break from their day-to-day lives to focus on that. So it's a weekly program and engaging folks and kind of reteaching them, and I should step back. I think everybody knows that, but I come up through a public health background and through kinesiology and psychology. Not everybody knows exactly, or you do know and you don't always put it into practice, what you should be eating and what should be on your plate versus what shouldn't. So it's really, so to speak, basic concepts, but it's getting them to stick in a practical way for folks. So how do you plan so you can eat healthy? It's good.
Planning, that's important. How many days do I come to work and I'm like, I didn't make my lunch. So I'll go out
So
and
then what do you do? Yeah.
either overeat or eat something that's not ideal. But and we're lucky there's a lot of great places to get lunch from around here, which is
Yes, we have some amazing restaurants.
Yeah.
But then it's portion control.
Then, because you always get more than you
wow,
need.
this is so good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. It is funny that you feel like you're like, trying to explain something to somebody, and you just assume that, but there are people that don't pick up on it. I remember who knows how long ago this was, maybe 2011, there was a group that, it was a diabetes support group, and I can't remember what's yours called. Does it have a name? Is it?
Davies self-management.
Okay. I spoke to a group up at Regional. There's maybe 10 to 15 people out there, and I was like, I'd already spoken to them once. And they're looking at it from the dental side and things like that. And I was like, okay, what am I going to talk about this time? It's been that long. It might be the same people there. I probably have to say something different. And I was Googled something, and I found an article, a scholarly article, and there was some type of symposium held where they had endocrinologists and periodontists, which are a specialty in dentistry that deals with the gums and the bone around the teeth, and neurologists that dealt with dementia, and docs that dealt with kidney failure, and I think I've already mentioned the rheumatologist to dealing with arthritis. Well, got coronary artery disease, cardiologists and physicians on board in that area of specialty too. So what do these all have in common? They are diseases of inflammation. Okay, they're diseases of inflammation. Now, it depends kind of on what okay, so here we go into bro science. So this is me saying this. It depends on what your risk, where your risk lies. And I think we all know this. You may have an uncle that has dementia, Alzheimer's. Then you have another uncle that died at 50 from a heart attack. Then you have another uncle that's just fine, lived till 70, but boy, his joints hurt. or maybe there's somebody that had failing eyes, or maybe from diabetes, or they had diabetes, and that leads to a lot of other things. Folks, we all have a chink in our armor somewhere. Maybe you have two, maybe you have three, but we all have one, but they're different from person to person. And so, but one of the things that was common about people with excess body fat, especially around the waist, is those fat cells, they trigger the secretion of some biochemicals that kick off inflammation. Now, one of them is tumor necrosis factor, and it might be a number after it too. There's definitely a number after the interleukin. Okay, it's 1 or 6 or something. There's a bunch of different interleukins, but what they found was that the people that are carrying the excess weight, they produce more of this, and this leads to inflammation. The question is, how will it express in your body? Will it be in the form of diabetes? Will you have kidney problems? Will you have arthritis? Will you have dementia, coronary artery disease, periodontal disease? Okay, and so that's the knowledge I dropped on them that day that I had just learned 35 minutes before that when I saw that study. And but it makes perfect sense. But back to portion size. So there's two components to the portion size. There's your immediate blood sugar spike from eating the vilified regular potato versus the sweet potato, right? Mm-hmm. Or whatever, rice versus steak, and that's a whole nother podcast, right? That's a whole series of podcasts, okay? But then there's the long term, when we talk about weight, of excess calories, or maybe calories that you take in the form of simpler carbohydrates that go straight to fat. And now we're back to the activity level, where for most of us, we sit around all day at work. That's our job, sit. Not many of us are out there behind that mule anymore, thank God. All right. Mm-hmm. Right. Do you remember like all the kind of main 3 or 4 things the Blue Zones have in common? Because I think I have some of them. So one of them is they all seem to have a sense of community. And I think about the Seventh-day Adventists in Loma Linda, California. Okay, they're pretty tight, and people go to church and involved in church groups, and which is one of the reasons that organized religion is awesome. It's a way to be part of a community and be part of something. I think they typically, those Seventh-day Adventists, they eat a lot of veggies. They eat a lot of veggies, and it's something about the way they interpret the scripture that plant-based diet, or maybe not, I'm not saying they're vegan or vegetarian, but you talk about the way you set your plate up. Mm-hmm. For proper nutrition. Not too much of this, not too much of that, balance, lots of different colors. They do that. These people generally, in the Blue Zones, they do something. They get out and do something. Active. Yeah. They're not necessarily Olympians, but they tend to their garden, or in, I think it's Sardinia, part of Sardinia out in the Mediterranean, they tend their goats and mend their fences and do whatever they have to do, step on grapes, whatever they do in Sardinia. And then there's another thing that I can't remember exactly. There are a couple more things, but that community and having people and not really involved with their study, but I've read on the Blue Zone site, they say one of the things that they look for is as sort of a, how do you want to say it, a red flag, is if you cannot pick up a telephone, if you're having a problem, an issue, and have 3 people that you can call. Now, I know there's some men out there that can't do that. You ladies communicate better, it seems. At least my wife is like that. You guys you just seem to communicate with each other better. Guys don't pick up the phone and just call each other to chat. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, not as much.
Hey,
it's more of
a
purpose.
Yeah.
A specific.
Yeah. Yeah. And everybody's busy, so but I thought about that one time, and I was like, yeah, I guess I could say I've got 3 that if I really had something was going on, if something was going on in my marriage or with my children or at work, and it was just something I just needed to talk to somebody, and I could probably squeeze out 3, maybe. But I thought that was an interesting benchmark to look at for somebody. But when you have a support group like that, like the diabetes group, you have people.
Right.
And that's
Walking your walk, yeah.
difficult to set up a study to measure the value of that, right?
It is, you can, right. You can't.
Okay. All right. So, do you think you were planning on going back to Manio? So it is February 7th, and I guess Sheila got here a little after 1. No, you got here promptly at 1, and we were talking about the water.
Yeah,
So,
I thought it was going to be much later than I was because I was sitting for a little bit.
Right. So it's been blowing southwest 25 or more for about 24 hours now. And some of the roads over in Manio, the typical spots by Dunkin' Donuts and whatnot, the water's starting to come over. And
I'm on the causeway. And high tide's at 6:15 tonight, so
Right.
I don't know. I'm heading back to Manio. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah, this was great. I enjoyed it. I love what you're doing. I think it's very cool.
I get to, I told Sheila earlier, she asked me, like most people, they get this look on their face like, why, what made you think about doing this? And I was like, I don't know. I was like, I told you I've lost thousands of dollars over the years just sitting and talking and not working. So I figured, why not just do it? And there's just so many interesting people. And like, I don't know if we said it on the podcast, but we said it before, you never really get a chance to talk with somebody.
Right. Yeah.
It's before a meeting, or it's before church, or it's always just how you doing.
It's the superficial, yeah, just check-ins, but
Yeah.
not learn about one another and
Yeah.
why you do things and what you think.
And I invariably run across, we talked about Milepost, and we talked about Noah Snyder and his artwork. I didn't know he did that. I had no idea. I found the same thing about Ken Savage and about his artwork, and so many interesting people that I'm actually around. I'm in their orbit, and I have no idea of all the cool stuff they do. So, I mean, living here in Dare County, you guys are going to have to put up with this podcast for years. So, unsubscribe now and save yourself the waste of time.
It's awesome. It's awesome. Thank you for doing it. It's fun.
Yeah. Well, thanks for taking the time, because you have a busy schedule and there's a lot of important things going on, which is really the point of wearing the afro. Is we needed to make it not important for a while, because some people really do. They do things that are more important than other people do when it comes to helping people. And Sheila, you're one of those people. Yeah.
Thanks.
So with that, we're out.
Awesome. Take care.